Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something you think you understand: the life of a garbage collector. You've seen them countless times, driving those massive trucks through your neighborhood at dawn, hoisting bins with mechanical precision, making your trash disappear like some kind of municipal magic trick. You might think it's simple work. Just throw garbage into a truck, drive around the neighborhood, collect a paycheck, right? Maybe you've even thought at least they get good benefits, or it can't be that hard. Anyone can pick up trash. Well, friend, you're about to discover why the average garbage collector suffers more workplace injuries than construction workers. Why the job has one of the highest fatality rates in America. And why what looks like mindless labor is actually a deadly dance with machinery, traffic, and substances that could kill you in dozens of different ways. Behind those early morning routes and efficient collection schedules is a world of crushing physical demands, toxic chemical exposure, and life-threatening dangers that would break most people before their first week is over. You're about to enter a universe where every day starts in darkness, every street presents new hazards, and every bin might contain something that could end your career or your life. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you've just clocked in for your shift as a garbage collector. The good news, you have a steady job with decent pay. The bad news, you're about to discover why this profession has a fatality rate that's 10 times higher than the average American worker, and why most people who try it don't make it past their first month. Welcome to the forgotten front lines of urban survival. Chapter 1: The 4 a.m. Apocalypse. Your day begins at 4 a.m., not because you're an early riser by choice, but because garbage collection happens when most of civilization is still unconscious, while the rest of the world sleeps peacefully in their beds. You're stumbling through the darkness toward a job that will test every limit of human endurance. The depot is a cavernous warehouse that smells like a mixture of diesel fuel, hydraulic fluid, and the lingering essence of 1 million tons of garbage that have passed through these doors. The fluorescent lights flicker with the enthusiasm of a dying lighthouse, casting harsh shadows across a fleet of garbage trucks that look more like mechanical beasts than vehicles. Your truck, if you can call something the size of a small building a truck, weighs 64,000 pounds when fully loaded and has enough hydraulic power to crush a car into a pancake. The engine alone is louder than a rock concert, and that's before you factor in the grinding, crushing, and compacting sounds that will assault your eardrums for the next 10 hours. The pre-shift inspection isn't just routine paperwork, it's a life or death ritual. Check the hydraulic systems that could explode without warning. Test the backup alarms that are the only thing standing between you and being crushed by reversing vehicles. Examine the lifting mechanisms that will be grabbing containers hundreds of times today, any one of which could malfunction and send you to the hospital. The weather doesn't matter in this job. Rain makes everything slippery and dangerous. Snow turns every step into a potential fall. Ice creates skating rinks out of normally manageable surfaces. Summer heat makes the cab of your truck into a mobile sauna while you work in temperatures that can reach 120 degrees inside the vehicle. But the worst part of starting your day at 4 a.m. isn't the physical discomfort, it's the social isolation. While everyone else lives on normal human schedules, you exist in a parallel universe. Your workday ends when most people are having lunch. Your weekend starts on Wednesday. Your social life becomes non-existent because you're asleep when everyone else is awake and working when everyone else is relaxing. By 4:30 a.m., you're behind the wheel of a mechanical monster, heading into the darkness toward neighborhoods full of people who have no idea that their comfortable lives depend entirely on your willingness to do work that could kill you. The GPS shows your route 800 to 1,200 stops today, depending on the route. Each stop presents new opportunities for injury, death, or exposure to hazardous materials. The radio crackles with traffic from other crews, discussing mechanical problems, traffic accidents, and the occasional emergency that sends someone to the hospital. This isn't a job where you worry about meeting quarterly sales targets. This is a job where you worry about making it home alive. Still think this looks easy? We haven't even collected our first bin yet. Chapter 2: The Machinery of Death. Your garbage truck isn't just a vehicle. It's a collection of industrial machinery specifically designed to compress, crush, and destroy everything that goes into it, including you if you make a mistake. Every system on this truck has enough power to cause serious injury or death, and you'll be working intimately with all of them for the next 10 hours. The hydraulic system operates at pressures exceeding 2,000 psi, enough force to cut through steel or human bone with equal efficiency. The hydraulic lines carrying this pressure run throughout the truck, and a rupture could spray hydraulic fluid with enough force to inject it directly into your bloodstream, causing immediate tissue death and potential systemic poisoning. The packer blade, the mechanism that compresses garbage in the hopper, exerts over 30,000 pounds of force and cycles automatically every few minutes. This blade doesn't distinguish between garbage and human beings. Workers have been caught in the hopper and crushed to death in seconds, their screams drowned out by the engine noise that makes communication nearly impossible. The lifting forks that grab and empty containers can lift 1,000 pounds, but have no safety sensors to detect when a human being is in the wrong place at the wrong time. These forks move with mechanical precision and unstoppable force. Get caught between a lifting fork and a container, and you'll be crushed before anyone realizes what happened. The backup systems that are supposed to prevent accidents often fail when you need them most. Backup alarms get drowned out by engine noise and urban ambient sound. Mirrors reflect everything except the blind spots where most accidents occur. Safety switches can be bypassed or malfunction, leaving you with no protection except your own awareness and reflexes. The truck's size creates unique dangers in residential neighborhoods designed for passenger cars. Power lines that clear normal vehicles can decapitate anyone standing on top of the truck. Tree branches that pose no threat to cars can sweep workers off the truck's platform. Overpasses and bridges that accommodate regular traffic can crush the top of a garbage truck and anyone unfortunate enough to be riding there. The mechanical systems require constant maintenance, but garbage trucks operate in conditions that accelerate, wear, and break down. Hydraulic seals fail from constant use. Metal components crack from stress and corrosion. Electrical systems short out from exposure to moisture and debris. When these systems fail, they don't just stop working, they often fail catastrophically, creating immediate dangers for anyone nearby. Loading and unloading the truck involves climbing on and off moving equipment dozens of times per hour. The steps and handholds become slippery from rain, ice, or spilled liquids from garbage. A slip while the truck is moving, even slowly, can result in being run over by the rear wheels or caught in the mechanical systems. The truck's blind spots are enormous and deadly. The driver can't see directly behind the vehicle, to the immediate sides, or in many areas where workers routinely operate. Communication between crew members relies on hand signals that can be misunderstood or missed entirely in poor visibility conditions. Every mechanical system on the truck is designed for efficiency and durability, not worker safety. Safety features are often added as afterthoughts and are the first things to be bypassed when they interfere with productivity. The machinery that makes garbage collection possible is the same machinery that makes it one of America's most dangerous occupations. Chapter 3: The Toxic Lottery. Every container you approach is a mystery box that could contain anything from harmless household waste to industrial chemicals that could blind you, burn your skin, or shut down your vital organs. Residential garbage collection means dealing with hazardous materials that most people dispose of improperly, creating daily exposure to substances that require specialized training and equipment to handle safely. Paint cans that still contain solvents create vapor clouds that can cause neurological damage with prolonged exposure. These vapors are heavier than air and collect in the bottom of the truck's hopper, creating a toxic atmosphere that you breathe while working around the back of the vehicle. The accumulation of paint vapors can reach concentrations that cause dizziness, headaches, and eventually permanent brain damage. Household cleaning products become chemical weapons when they mix together in garbage containers. Bleach and ammonia create chlorine gas that can cause immediate respiratory damage and death in confined spaces. Toilet bowl cleaners containing hydrochloric acid can burn through skin and clothing. Oven cleaners with sodium hydroxide can cause permanent blindness if splashed in eyes. Batteries of all types leak corrosive chemicals that destroy skin and respiratory tissue. Car batteries contain sulfuric acid that can cause third-degree burns. Lithium batteries from electronics can explode when damaged, sending toxic metal particles into the air. Alkaline batteries leak potassium hydroxide that causes chemical burns and can destroy lung tissue if inhaled. Medical waste from home healthcare creates exposure to blood-borne pathogens that can transmit hepatitis, HIV, and other life-threatening diseases. Used needles hidden in garbage bags can cause puncture wounds that introduce infected blood directly into your system. Chemotherapy drugs, disposed of improperly, can cause cancer in healthy people with minimal exposure. Asbestos from home renovation projects creates airborne fibers that cause mesothelioma and lung cancer decades after exposure. Homeowners removing old insulation, floor tiles, or roofing materials often dispose of asbestos-containing materials in regular garbage, creating clouds of deadly fibers when the garbage is compacted. Pesticides and herbicides from lawn care create neurological symptoms and long-term health problems with repeated exposure. Organophosphate compounds used in insecticides can cause immediate poisoning symptoms, including seizures and respiratory failure. Herbicides containing glyphosate have been linked to cancer and genetic damage. Motor oil and automotive fluids contain carcinogenic compounds that absorb through skin and accumulate in body tissues over time. Used motor oil contains lead, benzene, and other toxic metals that cause organ damage and cancer. Antifreeze tastes sweet but is extremely toxic, causing kidney failure and death in small quantities. Industrial solvents from hobby projects and small businesses create vapor exposures that damage the central nervous system. Toluene, xylene, and benzene are common solvents that cause personality changes, memory problems, and eventual brain damage. These vapors concentrate in enclosed areas like truck hoppers and collection containers. Unknown chemicals in unmarked containers create Russian roulette scenarios where any exposure could be fatal. Home laboratories, illegal drug operations, and industrial dumping create mixtures of chemicals that even hazardous materials specialists can't identify without extensive testing. One breath of the wrong vapor cloud could end your career or your life. The protective equipment provided for garbage collection is designed for normal household waste, not the chemical laboratory that residential garbage has become. Standard work gloves don't protect against chemical burns. Safety glasses don't prevent vapor inhalation. The respirators that could protect you aren't provided because they would slow down collection and reduce productivity. Chapter 4: The Disease Vector Highway. Your daily route isn't just a collection of neighborhoods. It's a disease transmission network where you're exposed to every pathogen, parasite, and infectious agent that human beings can produce, often without any protection beyond latex gloves that tear on the first sharp object you encounter. Bacterial infections from garbage exposure are so common that experienced collectors can diagnose them by symptoms. Staph infections from cuts and scrapes exposed to contaminated surfaces, E. coli. From contact with human waste that shouldn't be in household garbage but always is. Salmonella from improperly disposed food waste that has been fermenting in summer heat for days. Viral hepatitis transmission occurs through contact with blood and bodily fluids that contaminate garbage from medical procedures, drug use, and accidents. Hepatitis B and C can survive on surfaces for weeks, turning every container into a potential infection source. A small cut on your hand becomes a doorway for viruses that cause liver damage and death. Tetanus exposure happens through puncture wounds from hidden sharp objects in garbage bags. Broken glass, metal cans with jagged edges, construction debris, and medical equipment create cutting hazards throughout your workday. Tetanus bacteria live in soil and animal waste, both common components of household garbage that introduce infection through even minor wounds. Respiratory infections spread through airborne particles released when garbage is disturbed and compressed. Tuberculosis bacteria can survive in dried sputum for months. Influenza viruses concentrate in tissue and medical waste. Fungal spores from moldy organic matter cause lung infections that can become systemic and life-threatening. Parasitic infections from contact with animal waste and contaminated organic matter include roundworms, hookworms, and other intestinal parasites that cause malnutrition and organ damage. Pet waste bags that break open create exposure to parasites that can migrate through human tissue and cause neurological damage. Skin infections from direct contact with contaminated surfaces cause persistent dermatitis, fungal infections, and chemical sensitivity reactions. Garbage juice, the liquid that accumulates from decomposing organic matter, contains concentrations of bacteria and chemicals that cause immediate skin reactions and long-term sensitization. Blood-borne pathogen exposure occurs when medical waste is improperly disposed in household garbage. Used needles, blood-soaked bandages, and surgical materials create direct exposure to HIV, hepatitis, and other blood-borne diseases. Home health care and illegal drug use generate medical waste that ends up in regular garbage collection. Zoonotic diseases from dead animals in garbage include rabies exposure from pets that died from the disease, plague bacteria from rodent carcasses, and various tick-borne illnesses from decomposing wildlife. Animals that die from poisoning also contaminate garbage with toxic substances that cause secondary poisoning in humans. Food poisoning becomes an occupational hazard when working around decomposing organic matter that releases bacterial toxins into the air. Botulism spores from improperly preserved foods can cause respiratory paralysis. Listeria bacteria from contaminated dairy products can cause meningitis and death. Chemical sensitization from repeated exposure to cleaning products, pesticides, and industrial chemicals creates allergic reactions that worsen with each exposure. Multiple chemical sensitivity syndrome develops in many garbage workers, making them unable to tolerate normal levels of chemical exposure in daily life. The immune system suppression that results from constant low-level exposure to pathogens and toxins makes garbage workers more susceptible to infections and less able to recover from illness. Chronic inflammation from chemical exposure reduces the body's ability to fight off diseases and increases cancer risk. Chapter 5. The Traffic Death Zone. Every street you work on becomes a potential accident scene where distracted drivers, aggressive motorists, and simple physics create a daily gauntlet that has made garbage collection one of the deadliest occupations in America. You're not just collecting garbage, you're dodging death in slow motion, while wearing reflective gear that might as well be invisible to drivers who are texting, drinking coffee, or simply not paying attention. Backing accidents are the leading cause of death in waste collection, and they happen with terrifying regularity. Your truck driver can't see everything behind the vehicle, despite mirrors and backup cameras that create a false sense of security. Workers who drop back to guide the truck or retrieve missed containers disappear into blind spots where 64,000 pounds of moving machinery can crush them before the driver realizes anything is wrong. Passing vehicles traveling at normal speeds become deadly projectiles when they encounter garbage trucks moving at 5 to 10 miles per hour. The speed differential creates closing rates that give drivers and workers almost no time to react to changing conditions. A car traveling 45 miles per hour approaches a stationary garbage truck at a rate that makes collision nearly inevitable if the driver is distracted for even a few seconds. Working in traffic lanes during collection creates exposure to vehicles that may not see workers until it's too late. Reflective clothing helps in ideal conditions, but early morning darkness, fog, rain, and sun glare reduce visibility to the point where bright orange vests become meaningless. Workers become invisible targets in conditions where most collection happens. Cell phone distraction has exponentially increased the danger for garbage workers as drivers pay more attention to their screens than the road. Text messaging, navigation apps, and social media create cognitive loads that prevent drivers from processing visual information about road hazards. A driver looking at their phone doesn't see the worker stepping into the street until after impact. Aggressive driving behaviors like road rage and impatience with slow-moving garbage trucks create deliberate dangers for workers. Drivers who swerve around garbage trucks at high speeds, pass in no-passing zones, or honk aggressively to hurry collection create unsafe conditions that workers can't control but must somehow survive. Intersection accidents occur when garbage trucks turning right create blind spots that hide pedestrians, cyclists, and workers from the driver's view. The truck's length and turning radius create sweep areas where people can be trapped and crushed between the truck and fixed objects like poles, buildings, or parked cars. Highway collection presents the ultimate traffic hazard where workers operate alongside vehicles traveling at 70 miles per hour with minimal separation. Interstate garbage collection requires workers to exit moving trucks in traffic, collect containers from median strips, and re-enter vehicles while surrounded by high-speed traffic that may not see them until impact. Weather conditions that reduce visibility and traction multiply traffic dangers exponentially. Rain makes everything slippery and reduces driver reaction times. Snow and ice create stopping distances that make collision inevitable, even when drivers see workers in time to react. Fog makes workers invisible until vehicles are too close to stop. Emergency vehicle interactions create additional traffic complications when ambulances, fire trucks, and police cars need to navigate around garbage trucks operating in traffic lanes. The lights, sirens, and radio traffic that accompany emergency responses distract drivers and create chaotic traffic conditions around garbage workers. Parking configurations force garbage trucks into dangerous positions, where normal traffic flow is disrupted and driver expectations are violated. Trucks collecting from narrow streets, cul-de-sacs, and areas with limited maneuvering space must back into traffic lanes, block intersections, and create temporary obstacles that drivers don't anticipate. The fatality statistics tell the story. Garbage workers are killed by traffic accidents at rates that exceed police officers, firefighters, and most other emergency responders. The difference is that emergency responders choose dangerous situations while garbage workers face traffic dangers, simply by doing routine work that society requires but refuses to acknowledge as heroic. Chapter 6: The Weight of the World. The physical demands of garbage collection go far beyond what most people can imagine. Combining the lifting requirements of professional moving with the endurance demands of marathon running, all while wearing protective equipment that restricts movement and breathing in an environment designed to break down the human body. Container weights that legally shouldn't exceed 50 pounds routinely contain 100 to 200 pounds of water-soaked garbage, construction debris, or dense materials that homeowners dispose of without consideration for the people who must lift them. A single container of wet concrete, old paint, or automotive parts can weigh more than many workers can safely lift. But the schedule doesn't allow time for special handling procedures. Repetitive lifting motions performed hundreds of times per day create cumulative stress injuries that develop gradually and become permanently disabling. The human spine isn't designed to repeatedly lift heavy weights while twisting, bending, and working from awkward positions required by garbage collection. Herniated discs, compressed vertebrae, and chronic back pain are essentially guaranteed after years of this work. Awkward lifting positions are required when containers are placed in locations that prevent proper lifting technique. Containers wedged between cars, placed on steep slopes, or positioned behind obstacles force workers to lift with poor body mechanics that multiply injury risk. The ideal lifting posture taught in safety training is impossible in most real-world collection scenarios. Overhead lifting requirements when emptying containers into high-sided trucks create shoulder injuries and upper extremity problems that worsen with age. Raising heavy containers above shoulder height while maintaining balance and control requires strength and flexibility that exceed normal human capabilities, especially when performed repeatedly throughout long shifts. Walking distances during collection routes often exceed 10 to 15 miles per day on uneven surfaces that include stairs, slopes, gravel, ice, and obstacles that create constant fall hazards. This walking happens while carrying equipment, wearing heavy boots, and navigating around traffic and machinery that create additional balance challenges. Loading and unloading trucks requires climbing on and off equipment dozens of times per hour while wearing protective gear that restricts mobility. The steps and handholds on garbage trucks become slippery from weather, spilled liquids, and accumulated grime that make falls inevitable during long careers in waste collection. Time pressure from route schedules that prioritize efficiency over safety force workers to move faster than safe lifting techniques allow. The conflict between productivity requirements and injury prevention creates impossible choices where workers must risk injury to keep their jobs or work safely and face discipline for falling behind schedule. Protective equipment that should reduce injury risk often creates additional physical stress through restricted movement, increased weight, and reduced dexterity. Safety boots that prevent puncture wounds also cause foot and leg fatigue. Gloves that protect against cuts reduce grip strength and tactile feedback. Reflective vests trap heat and moisture while adding weight to an already physically demanding job. Environmental conditions multiply physical stress through extreme temperatures that require additional energy for thermoregulation. Working in summer heat while wearing protective equipment creates heat stress that reduces physical capacity and increases injury risk. Winter conditions require additional clothing that restricts movement while creating slip and fall hazards. Age-related physical decline makes garbage collection unsustainable for most workers beyond their early 40s. But the physical demands of the job accelerate aging and injury accumulation that force earlier retirement or career changes. Workers who survive the immediate dangers of traffic and machinery often face disability from cumulative physical damage that leaves them unable to continue working. The ergonomic design of garbage trucks and containers prioritizes mechanical efficiency over human factors, creating equipment that maximizes productivity while systematically destroying worker health. The height of truck hoppers, the weight of containers, and the placement of controls all favor mechanical systems over human physical capabilities. Chapter 7. The Noise Assault. The sound levels in garbage collection exceed what the human ear can safely tolerate, creating a daily audio assault that causes permanent hearing damage while making communication nearly impossible during critical safety situations. Engine noise from garbage trucks ranges from 85 to 100 decibels at normal operating levels, well above the 85 decibel threshold where hearing damage begins. This noise is constant throughout the workday and creates cumulative exposure that guarantees hearing loss over time. The diesel engines required to power hydraulic systems and move heavy loads generate noise levels that would require hearing protection in most industrial settings. Hydraulic system noise from pumps, cylinders, and compression mechanisms adds another layer of harmful sound that peaks at over 110 decibels during lifting and compacting operations. The high-pressure hydraulic systems that make garbage collection mechanically possible create noise levels that cause immediate pain and rapid hearing damage with unprotected exposure. Backup alarms designed to warn people about moving vehicles create constant beeping at 102 to 107 decibels that workers must tolerate for hours at a time. These safety devices that prevent crushing accidents also cause hearing damage to the workers they're supposed to protect. The irony of safety equipment that causes injury isn't lost on experienced collectors. Metal-on-metal contact when containers impact truck bodies, lifting forks grab container rims, and load packers compress materials create sharp impact noises that exceed 120 decibels. These sudden loud noises cause immediate hearing damage and create startle responses that can lead to accidents when workers lose focus or balance. Air brake systems that operate repeatedly throughout collection routes generate explosive noise bursts over 110 decibels every time trucks stop and start. The compressed air release creates sharp, sudden noises that damage hearing and mask other important sounds like traffic, backup alarms, and worker communications. Communication difficulties from constant noise exposure make it nearly impossible for workers to hear traffic approaching, equipment malfunctions developing, or emergency warnings from other crew members. Hand signals and visual communication become essential, but they're often ineffective in poor visibility conditions or when workers are focused on avoiding immediate hazards. Hearing protection that could prevent damage is often uncomfortable, reduces situational awareness, or interferes with communication requirements that make the job safer in other ways. Workers must choose between protecting their hearing and being able to hear traffic, equipment problems, or emergency communications from coworkers. Noise-induced fatigue from constant exposure to harmful sound levels creates mental exhaustion that increases accident risk and reduces job performance. The cognitive load required to process constant loud noise while maintaining awareness of multiple safety threats is mentally exhausting and unsustainable. over long periods. Tinnitus ringing in the ears affects most long-term garbage workers and creates permanent audio disturbance that interferes with sleep, concentration, and quality of life. The constant ringing or buzzing sound never stops and often worsens over time, making retirement miserable for workers who sacrificed their hearing for decades of dangerous work. Community noise complaints about early morning garbage collection create pressure to work faster and reduce the time spent in each area, which ironically increases noise levels as workers rush to complete routes and equipment operates at higher stress levels. The contradiction between noise reduction goals and operational efficiency creates impossible demands. Cumulative noise exposure standards that limit daily sound exposure are routinely exceeded in garbage collection, but enforcement is minimal and protective measures are often inadequate or impractical. Workers absorb noise levels that would be illegal in manufacturing environments, while receiving minimal protection or compensation for hearing damage. The long-term health impacts of chronic noise exposure include cardiovascular disease, sleep disruption, cognitive impairment, and psychological stress that extend far beyond simple hearing loss. Garbage workers face noise-related health problems that affect their entire lives, not just their ability to hear. Chapter 8: The Chemical Soup. Every container you empty releases a chemical cocktail into the air you breathe, creating exposure patterns that would require hazmat certification in any other industry but are considered normal in waste collection. The combination of household chemicals, industrial waste, and decomposition products creates an atmospheric chemistry experiment where you're the unwilling test subject. Volatile organic compounds, VOCs from paints, solvents, cleaning products, and automotive fluids create vapor clouds that cause immediate symptoms and long-term health problems. These chemicals evaporate at normal temperatures and concentrate in enclosed spaces like truck hoppers and containers. Exposure to VOC mixtures causes headaches, dizziness, nausea, and eventual neurological damage. Methane gas produced by decomposing organic waste creates explosion hazards and asphyxiation risks in enclosed areas. Methane is odorless, colorless, and displaces oxygen in confined spaces like truck compartments and dumpster areas. Workers have been overcome by methane poisoning and killed in explosions when methane accumulated to dangerous levels. Hydrogen sulfide from rotting organic matter and sewage creates the characteristic rotten egg smell of garbage while causing respiratory damage and nervous system effects. This gas is toxic at very low concentrations and can cause death at higher levels. Chronic exposure to hydrogen sulfide causes eye irritation, respiratory problems, and neurological symptoms. Ammonia from decomposing animal waste and cleaning products creates respiratory irritation and can cause chemical burns to eyes, nose, and throat. High concentrations of ammonia can cause permanent lung damage and scarring. The combination of ammonia with other chemicals can create toxic gas, mixtures that are more dangerous than individual components. Heavy metals from batteries, electronics, and automotive waste create long-term accumulation in body tissues that cause organ damage and cancer. Lead from old paint and gasoline additives causes neurological damage and developmental problems. Mercury from thermometers and fluorescent lights causes kidney damage and nervous system problems. Asbestos fibers from building materials and automotive parts become airborne when garbage is disturbed and compressed. These microscopic fibers lodge in lung tissue and cause mesothelioma and lung cancer decades after exposure. No level of asbestos exposure is considered safe, but garbage workers encounter it regularly from renovation debris and automotive waste. Formaldehyde from building materials, furniture, and embalming fluids causes respiratory irritation and is classified as a human carcinogen. Chronic exposure to formaldehyde increases cancer risk and causes allergic sensitization that makes workers intolerant to normal levels of chemical exposure in daily life. Pesticide residues from lawn care and pest control create neurological symptoms and long-term health problems. Organophosphate compounds cause immediate poisoning symptoms and chronic exposure effects. Herbicides and insecticides accumulate in body tissues and may cause cancer, reproductive problems, and immune system damage. Industrial solvents from automotive maintenance, painting, and manufacturing create central nervous system depression and organ damage. Benzene, toluene, and xylene are common solvents that cause personality changes, memory problems, and eventual brain damage. These chemicals are absorbed through skin contact and inhalation. Unknown chemical mixtures from illegal dumping and accidental spills create exposure scenarios that can't be predicted or prevented. Home laboratories, industrial discharge, and chemical accidents create combinations of substances that even chemists can't identify without extensive analysis. One exposure to an unknown chemical mixture could cause immediate poisoning or long-term health effects. Protective equipment for chemical exposure is minimal or non-existent in most garbage collection operations. Standard work clothing doesn't protect against chemical absorption through skin. Basic dust masks don't filter chemical vapors. The specialized equipment that could protect workers would slow collection and reduce productivity. Medical monitoring for chemical exposure is rarely provided, despite clear evidence that garbage workers face higher cancer rates and neurological problems than the general population. Early detection of chemical-related health problems could prevent serious illness. But most workers don't receive adequate health care to identify exposure-related problems until they become severe. Chapter 9: The Weather Warfare. Weather doesn't just make garbage collection uncomfortable. It transforms an already dangerous job into a survival scenario, where every element of nature becomes a threat to your safety and health. Unlike office workers who can stay inside during storms, garbage workers face the worst weather conditions while operating heavy machinery and handling hazardous materials. Summer heat turns garbage trucks into mobile ovens, where cab temperatures exceed 120 degrees, while workers wear protective equipment that prevents heat dissipation. Heat stroke becomes a daily threat, as workers dehydrate faster than they can replace fluids while working in direct sunlight without shade or air conditioning. The metal surfaces of trucks become hot enough to cause burns through protective clothing. Winter conditions create ice-covered surfaces where workers must maintain footing while lifting heavy containers and climbing on and off moving equipment. Black ice forms on truck steps and walking surfaces, creating fall hazards that can result in serious injuries. Hypothermia and frostbite affect workers who can't maintain body heat while working in wind, snow, and sub-freezing temperatures. Rain transforms every surface into a slip hazard, while creating electrical dangers around hydraulic systems and truck equipment. Wet containers become impossible to grip safely, while wet truck surfaces create fall risks during mounting and dismounting procedures. Rain also increases traffic dangers as driver visibility decreases and stopping distances increase. Snow and ice accumulation makes many routes impassable for standard garbage trucks, while creating emergency situations where accumulated waste becomes health hazards. Workers must use chains, salt, and specialized equipment to maintain collection schedules, while facing increased accident risks from reduced visibility and traction. Wind creates unique dangers when working around tall trucks that can catch wind and become unstable. High winds can blow lightweight debris into workers' faces and eyes, while making it impossible to control loose materials during loading procedures. Strong winds also affect truck handling and create additional traffic hazards. Lightning during thunderstorms creates electrical hazards for workers operating around metal trucks and hydraulic systems. The combination of metal equipment, electrical systems, and exposure to weather makes garbage workers particularly vulnerable to lightning strikes. Standard safety protocols require suspending operations during storms, but schedule pressures often override safety considerations. Extreme weather events like tornadoes, hurricanes, and severe storms create emergency response situations where garbage workers become first responders dealing with storm debris while facing ongoing weather hazards. Post-storm cleanup involves handling damaged buildings, contaminated floodwater, and hazardous materials while working in unstable conditions. Temperature extremes affect equipment, performance, and safety systems in ways that create additional hazards for workers. Hydraulic fluids become thick in cold weather, creating excessive pressure that can cause system failures. Extreme heat causes expansion and stress in mechanical systems that can lead to catastrophic equipment failures. Seasonal changes in daylight hours mean that most garbage collection happens in darkness during winter months, increasing traffic hazards and reducing visibility for all safety-critical tasks. Working by artificial light creates shadows and blind spots that hide hazards while making it difficult to assess container contents and road conditions. Weather-related health problems, from constant exposure to temperature extremes and moisture, create chronic conditions that affect workers' ability to perform safely. Arthritis from cold and damp conditions reduces mobility and strength. Respiratory problems from breathing cold air while exerting effort can trigger asthma and other breathing difficulties. Protective clothing for weather conditions often conflicts with safety equipment requirements and mobility needs for the job. Insulated clothing for cold weather restricts movement and increases fall risks. Rain gear reduces visibility and dexterity while creating heat buildup during physical exertion. Weather protection that keeps workers comfortable often makes them less safe. Climate change has intensified weather extremes and created new challenges for garbage workers, who must adapt to more frequent severe weather events, while maintaining collection schedules that don't account for changing environmental conditions. Extreme heat events, intense storms, and unusual weather patterns create unprecedented hazards for workers who are already facing dangerous conditions. Chapter 10. The Route from Hell. Your daily route isn't just a series of stops. It's a carefully orchestrated obstacle course designed to test every aspect of human endurance while exposing you to maximum danger in minimum time. Each neighborhood presents unique hazards, and the pressure to maintain impossible schedules ensures that safety becomes a luxury you can't afford. Urban routes through dense city neighborhoods require navigating narrow streets designed for horse-drawn carriages while operating trucks the size of small buildings. Parked cars create choke points where garbage trucks must squeeze through spaces with inches to spare. Double-parked vehicles force trucks into oncoming traffic lanes while workers operate in the street collecting containers. Suburban routes with long driveways and hidden containers require walking distances that turn each stop into a mini-marathon while carrying equipment and dragging containers that homeowners position for their convenience rather than worker safety. Steep driveways become slip hazards in wet weather while creating back injuries from dragging heavy containers up and down slopes. Hills and steep grades test truck braking systems while creating runaway vehicle hazards. If air brakes fail or hydraulic systems malfunction, workers operating on slopes face increased fall risks and container handling difficulties while trucks struggle to maintain traction and control. Emergency escapes from runaway trucks are limited when workers are trapped between the vehicle and downhill obstacles. Dead-end streets and cul-de-sacs require complex backing, maneuvers that create maximum risk for crushing accidents while providing minimal escape routes if equipment malfunctions. Turning radius limitations force trucks into positions where backing becomes the only option, multiplying accident risks in areas where children play and visibility is limited. School zones create peak danger periods when garbage collection coincides with student arrival and departure times. Children walk into school don't understand garbage truck blind spots and mechanical hazards, while parents dropping off students create traffic congestion and distraction. The combination of school buses, parent vehicles, and pedestrian traffic creates chaos around collection operations. Construction zones force garbage trucks to navigate reduced lane widths, temporary traffic controls, and work areas while maintaining collection schedules. Construction, equipment, materials, and worker activity create additional obstacles while road surface changes affect truck stability and handling. Commercial districts with heavy truck traffic create additional collision risks when garbage trucks operate alongside delivery vehicles, commercial haulers, and industrial equipment. Loading docks, warehouse areas, and commercial vehicle operations create congestion and visibility problems that multiply accident potential. Industrial areas expose workers to additional chemical hazards from manufacturing processes, storage facilities, and transportation operations, while creating traffic patterns that prioritize commercial vehicle movement over worker safety. Chemical plants, refineries, and manufacturing facilities create atmospheric contamination that adds to normal garbage collection exposure risks. Highway access for landfill runs exposes workers to high-speed traffic conditions where loaded garbage trucks struggle to maintain highway speeds, while creating hazards for other drivers. Highway access for landfill runs exposes workers to high-speed traffic conditions where loaded garbage trucks struggle to maintain highway speeds while creating hazards for other drivers. Interstate merging with a 64,000-pound vehicle that accelerates slowly becomes a death-defying exercise, where physics and impatience collide. The truck's weight and aerodynamics make it unstable in crosswinds, while limiting braking distance and escape options. Rural routes through agricultural areas present unique hazards, including unmarked roads, loose gravel surfaces, and farm equipment that shares narrow roads with garbage trucks. Pesticide spraying operations create chemical exposure risks, while livestock and wildlife crossings create collision hazards that urban drivers never encounter. Time pressure from route schedules that prioritize efficiency over safety force drivers and workers to take risks that experienced professionals know are dangerous. Behind schedule, trucks create pressure to speed up collection, skip safety procedures, and take shortcuts that increase accident probability. The mathematical impossibility of completing assigned routes safely within allotted time creates daily conflicts between survival and employment. GPS navigation systems that route trucks through areas inappropriate for large vehicles create situations where trucks become trapped on roads too narrow for safe operation or under bridges too low for clearance. Consumer GPS doesn't account for commercial vehicle restrictions, bridge heights, or weight limits that make certain routes impassable or dangerous. Neighborhood layout chaos from poor urban planning creates collection challenges where container placement makes safe operation nearly impossible. Narrow streets, limited parking, inadequate turnaround areas, and poor sightlines combine to create accident scenarios that workers must navigate dozens of times per day. Traffic pattern disruption from garbage collection operations creates driver frustration, and aggressive behavior that endangers workers who can't control public reaction to necessary municipal services. Road rage incidents involving garbage trucks often target workers who become convenient scapegoats for traffic frustration they didn't create. Emergency vehicle conflicts occur when garbage trucks operating on scheduled routes encounter ambulances, fire trucks, and police vehicles that require immediate road access. The size and limited mobility of garbage trucks make it difficult to clear emergency vehicle paths quickly, creating delays in emergency response and additional stress for garbage workers. Chapter 11. The Container Chaos. Every container you approach is a potential death trap designed by homeowners who have no understanding of safe handling procedures or weight limits. Filled with materials that could kill you instantly or slowly over years of exposure. The innocent-looking bins that line America's streets contain horrors that would shock people who simply place them at the curb and assume someone else will deal with the consequences. Weight violations are universal and extreme, with containers routinely weighing 200 to 300 pounds despite posted limits of 50 pounds. Homeowners dispose of concrete, automotive parts, roofing materials, and dead appliances in containers that workers must lift repeatedly throughout 10-hour shifts. A single container of wet concrete can weigh more than many workers can safely lift. But the schedule doesn't allow time for special handling procedures. Sharp object surprises include broken glass, metal scraps, construction debris, and medical waste that pierce through garbage bags and cut through protective equipment. Hypodermic needles from diabetic supplies and illegal drug use create puncture wounds that introduce blood-borne pathogens directly into workers' circulatory systems. Broken window glass creates cutting hazards that standard work gloves can't prevent. Chemical containers that leak, spill, or react with other materials create exposure scenarios ranging from skin burns to respiratory damage to explosion hazards. Paint cans that still contain solvents, automotive fluids that corrode metal and human tissue, and cleaning products that create toxic gas mixtures when combined. Unmarked containers holding unknown chemicals create Russian roulette scenarios where any exposure could be fatal. Dead animals in various stages of decomposition create disease, exposure, and psychological trauma that workers must simply accept as part of the job. Pet carcasses that died from diseases transmissible to humans. Wildlife poisoned by rodenticides that create secondary poisoning risks. And livestock remains that shouldn't be in residential collection but appear regularly anyway. Hidden hazards include propane tanks that can explode when compacted, ammunition that can detonate under pressure, and electronics containing toxic heavy metals that create long-term health risks. Car batteries containing sulfuric acid that causes chemical burns, fluorescent light bulbs with mercury vapor that causes neurological damage, and lithium batteries that can catch fire when damaged. Container placement by homeowners creates handling hazards when bins are positioned behind parked cars, on steep slopes, or in locations that require workers to lift from awkward positions that guarantee back injuries. Containers wedged between vehicles, placed against obstacles, or positioned on uneven surfaces force workers to abandon proper lifting technique and risk injury with every pickup. Overfilled containers that can't be lifted safely by mechanical systems require hand sorting and multiple trips that multiply exposure to hazardous materials while increasing physical stress and time pressure. Garbage that exceeds container capacity creates spillage hazards that spread contamination across collection areas, while creating additional cleanup requirements. Frozen containers in winter become impossible to empty when organic waste freezes to container walls and mechanical systems can't break the materials loose. Workers must use tools to chip frozen waste from containers while risking cuts, chemical exposure, and equipment damage that affects collection efficiency and safety. Liquid waste that accumulates in container bottoms creates spill hazards when containers are lifted and tipped for emptying. Garbage juice containing concentrated bacteria, chemicals, and decomposition products spills onto workers and equipment, while creating slippery surfaces that increase fall risks. Contaminated containers that held hazardous materials retain chemical residues that create ongoing exposure risks even after the original contents are removed. Industrial containers used for household garbage collection may contain chemical residues that react with normal household waste to create new hazards. Customer modifications to containers that compromise structural integrity or safety. Features create handling hazards that workers must discover through trial and error. Broken wheels, damaged lids, cracked containers, and homemade modifications that affect mechanical lifting systems create equipment damage and worker injury risks. Chapter 12. The Landfill Apocalypse. The journey to the landfill represents the climax of each day's dangers, where loaded trucks carrying tons of waste navigate to disposal facilities that present unique hazards, ranging from toxic atmospheres to equipment accidents to exposure conditions that make normal garbage collection seem safe by comparison. Landfill access roads, designed for heavy truck traffic, become proving grounds for vehicle handling and driver skill when loaded garbage trucks must navigate steep grades, sharp turns, and congested areas where dozens of waste haulers converge simultaneously. Dust clouds from unpaved roads reduce visibility while creating respiratory hazards that compound chemical exposures from cargo. Weighing procedures at landfill entrances create traffic bottlenecks where trucks loaded with volatile materials sit in long lines while exposure to methane, hydrogen sulfide, and other toxic gases increases with proximity to active disposal areas. Engine overheating from extended idling in hot weather creates additional mechanical hazards, while workers breathe concentrated pollution from multiple diesel engines. Unloading areas where garbage trucks dump their loads present unique crushing hazards. When hydraulic dumping systems operate around heavy equipment, other vehicles, and waste materials that shift unpredictably during unloading procedures, workers must position trucks precisely while avoiding bulldozers, compactors, and other landfill equipment operating in confined areas. Methane gas concentrations at active landfills create explosion hazards and asphyxiation risks that require constant monitoring and emergency response procedures. The colorless, odorless gas displaces oxygen and can cause unconsciousness and death in confined areas around truck cabs and loading areas. Methane detection equipment often malfunctions or provides inadequate warning for dangerous accumulation. Toxic atmospheric conditions from decomposing waste create respiratory hazards that exceed normal garbage collection exposure through concentrated versions of all the chemicals, biological agents, and industrial materials that comprise municipal solid waste. Hydrogen sulfide concentrations that cause immediate health effects, ammonia levels that burn respiratory tissue, and volatile organic compound mixtures that cause neurological symptoms. Heavy equipment operations around unloading trucks create crushing hazards when bulldozers, wheel loaders, and compactors operate in areas where truck drivers and workers must exit vehicles and direct unloading procedures. The noise levels from multiple diesel engines make communication nearly impossible while equipment operators may not see workers in blind spots. Fires and explosions from spontaneous combustion, methane ignition, and chemical reactions create emergency evacuation situations where loaded trucks must exit disposal areas quickly despite limited access roads and traffic congestion. Landfill fires produce toxic smoke that contains dioxins, heavy metals, and other carcinogenic compounds that create long-term health risks. Structural instability from waste settling and slope failures creates situations where trucks can be trapped in areas where the ground gives way under the weight of heavy vehicles. Waste pile collapses and embankment failures have buried equipment and workers who are unable to escape unstable areas. Disease vector exposure increases dramatically at landfills where rats, birds, insects, and other animals concentrate around food waste while serving as carriers for numerous diseases transmissible to humans. Rodent-borne diseases, bird flu, and insect-transmitted illnesses create additional health risks beyond chemical and physical hazards. Traffic hazards from multiple waste haulers operating simultaneously in confined areas create collision risks when trucks with limited visibility and mobility must maneuver around each other while navigating unloading procedures. Backup accidents and side impact collisions occur regularly in areas where spatial margins for error are minimal. Weather-related hazards are amplified at landfills where exposed operations provide no shelter from wind, rain, lightning, or temperature extremes, while creating additional safety risks through reduced visibility, slippery surfaces, and equipment performance problems that affect safe operation. Environmental justice concerns often place landfills in low-income communities and areas with limited political power, meaning that garbage workers face additional health risks from cumulative environmental pollution that affects air quality, groundwater, and soil contamination in disposal areas. Chapter 13. The Mechanical Mayhem. The garbage truck you depend on for your livelihood is essentially a mobile industrial accident waiting to happen, packed with hydraulic systems, mechanical components, and automated systems that can malfunction catastrophically without warning while you're working in close proximity to enough mechanical force to crush cars. Hydraulic system failures create immediate danger when high-pressure lines rupture and spray hydraulic fluid with enough force to penetrate skin and inject toxic chemicals directly into your bloodstream. The 2,000+ psi hydraulic systems that power lifting mechanisms and packer blades can fail catastrophically, sending metal fragments flying while creating toxic fluid spills that contaminate work areas. Packer blade malfunctions occur when the automated compression system that crushes garbage into the truck body cycles unexpectedly or fails to stop when workers are in the hopper area. The 30,000 pounds of force designed to compress waste doesn't distinguish between garbage and human beings, and workers have been crushed to death when they entered hoppers during packer operation. Lifting mechanism failures happen when the forks and arms that grab and empty containers malfunction while workers are positioned nearby or underneath suspended loads. Hydraulic cylinders that lift thousands of pounds can fail suddenly, dropping containers and mechanical components onto workers who have no time to escape falling objects. Brake system failures on vehicles weighing up to 64,000 pounds create runaway truck situations where workers on foot can't escape vehicles that have lost stopping ability. Air brake malfunctions are particularly dangerous on hills and grades, where loaded trucks gain momentum that makes collision inevitable when mechanical systems fail. Electrical system problems create fire hazards and equipment malfunctions that can trap workers or create dangerous operating conditions. Hydraulic pumps powered by electrical systems can fail suddenly, leaving trucks inoperable in traffic or creating situations where workers are stranded with partially loaded vehicles. Engine failures and overheating create toxic vapor hazards from burning oil, coolant, and other automotive fluids, while potentially causing fires that spread to compressed garbage containing unknown flammable materials. Engine compartment fires on garbage trucks can ignite cargo and create explosions when waste contains pressurized containers or flammable chemicals. Structural failures in truck bodies and components create crushing hazards when metal fatigue, corrosion, and stress cause parts to break suddenly while under load. Hopper walls that crack under pressure, hydraulic mounting brackets that fail catastrophically, and frame components that fracture without warning create unpredictable collapse hazards. Control system malfunctions cause automated systems to operate unexpectedly when electrical problems, sensor failures, or computer glitches trigger mechanical movement without operator input. Trucks that start moving when parked, lifting systems that activate without commands, and packer blades that cycle randomly create situations where workers can't predict or prevent equipment movement. Maintenance deferrals due to cost-cutting and schedule pressure result in equipment operating beyond safe service limits while developing problems that increase failure probability. Hydraulic seals that should be replaced continue operating until catastrophic failure. Brake components that exceed where limits remain in service until total failure. And safety systems that require calibration operate with unknown reliability. Emergency system failures affect backup alarms, warning lights, emergency shutoffs, and communication equipment that workers depend on for safety during normal operations. When safety systems fail, workers lose the protective equipment that makes dangerous work marginally safer while continuing to face all normal hazards without adequate protection. Operator error multiplied by fatigue, time pressure, and distraction creates situations where human mistakes trigger equipment accidents that could be prevented under ideal conditions. Workers operating complex machinery while tired, stressed, and hurried make errors that cause mechanical accidents with catastrophic consequences. Design defects in garbage trucks prioritize mechanical efficiency and cost reduction over worker safety, creating equipment that functions effectively for waste collection while systematically exposing workers to unnecessary risks. Safety features are often afterthoughts that don't integrate well with primary mechanical systems and may be bypassed when they interfere with productivity requirements. Chapter 14. The social invisibility. Despite performing work that's essential for public health and urban functionality, garbage workers exist in a state of social invisibility where their contributions are ignored, their challenges are minimized, and their basic humanity is often denied by the communities they serve. Public perception of garbage work as unskilled labor ignores the complex technical knowledge, physical abilities, and safety awareness required to operate heavy machinery safely while handling hazardous materials in dangerous environments. The characterization of waste collection as simple work that anyone can do undermines recognition of the expertise and professionalism required for safe and efficient operations. Social stigma attached to garbage work creates psychological stress for workers, who internalize negative attitudes about their occupation while facing daily reminders that society views their work as evidence of personal failure rather than essential public service. The shame and embarrassment that workers feel about their jobs affects family relationships, social interactions, and personal self. Economic devaluation through wages that don't reflect the danger, skill requirements, or social importance of waste collection work creates financial stress while sending the message that workers' lives and safety have minimal value. Communities that depend on garbage collection services often resist paying adequate wages for workers who risk their lives to maintain public health and environmental quality. Media representation of garbage workers typically focuses on stereotypes and comedy rather than the reality of dangerous, skilled work performed by professionals who keep communities functioning. Television shows, movies, and news coverage rarely acknowledge the expertise and heroism required for waste collection while perpetuating myths about the nature of the work. Political neglect affects funding for equipment, training, and safety improvements, while political leaders focus on more visible public services that generate voter approval. Garbage collection receives minimal political attention despite being essential infrastructure that affects every resident's daily life and community health. Professional isolation occurs when garbage workers have limited interaction with other occupational groups and minimal opportunities for career advancement or professional development. The specialized nature of waste collection creates employment situations where workers have few transferable skills and limited options for career change. Family impact from irregular schedules, physical demands, and safety concerns create stress in personal relationships, while making it difficult to maintain normal family routines and social connections. Children may feel embarrassed about their parents' work, while families worry constantly about workplace injuries and long-term health effects. Community exclusion happens when garbage workers are treated as outsiders in the neighborhoods they serve, viewed with suspicion or disdain by residents who don't understand or appreciate the work being performed for their benefit. Social interactions with customers are often negative or non-existent, creating isolation and alienation. Educational barriers prevent many garbage workers from accessing training and development opportunities that could lead to advancement or career change. Limited educational backgrounds that led to garbage collection employment also limit options for escaping the work when physical demands become unsustainable. Healthcare discrimination affects garbage workers, who may receive inadequate medical care due to assumptions about their intelligence, lifestyle, or worthiness of quality treatment. Medical professionals who don't understand occupational hazards may misdiagnose work-related health problems or minimize the significance of exposure-related symptoms. Legal invisibility occurs when workplace injuries and illnesses affecting garbage workers receive minimal attention from regulatory agencies and legal systems that prioritize more visible and politically influential occupational groups. Workers' compensation claims are often denied or minimized despite clear evidence of work-related health problems. The combination of social invisibility and occupational hazards creates a situation where workers face extraordinary dangers while receiving minimal recognition, support, or compensation for their sacrifices on behalf of community health and environmental protection. Chapter 15. The Health Insurance Illusion. The health benefits that supposedly compensate for dangerous working conditions and modest wages turn out to be elaborate, cost-shifting schemes that extract additional money from workers' paychecks while providing minimal actual health care when occupational injuries and illnesses inevitably occur. Premium costs for family health insurance coverage often consume 15 to 25% of gross wages, making comprehensive health care unaffordable for workers earning modest salaries while supporting families. The choice between health insurance and basic living expenses forces workers to gamble with their health or accept coverage that provides minimal protection when serious medical problems develop. Deductibles and co-payments structured to discourage healthcare utilization mean that workers pay for health insurance they can't afford to use when injuries or illnesses require medical attention. A $5,000 deductible effectively turns health insurance into catastrophic coverage only while workers pay out of pocket for routine medical care and minor injuries. Workers' compensation integration with health insurance creates bureaucratic nightmares when work-related injuries must be evaluated to determine which insurance system should provide coverage. The delays, paperwork, and disputes between insurance systems often leave injured workers without coverage while their conditions worsen from delayed treatment. Pre-authorization requirements for specialty care create barriers to treatment when occupational health problems require prompt attention from doctors who understand workplace exposures and injuries. The administrative delays inherent in insurance approval processes can turn minor problems into major health issues when treatment is postponed, pending insurance company approval. Provider network restrictions limit access to occupational health specialists who understand the unique medical problems faced by garbage workers. Primary care physicians who lack experience with chemical exposures, ergonomic injuries, and occupational diseases may provide inadequate treatment, while more appropriate specialists remain out of network and unaffordable. Claims denial procedures focus on finding reasons to avoid paying for legitimate medical expenses rather than facilitating appropriate care for work-related health problems. Insurance companies that profit by denying claims use medical reviews, documentation requirements, and administrative obstacles to discourage workers from seeking necessary treatment. Prescription coverage limitations affect medications needed to treat work-related injuries and illnesses while providing comprehensive coverage for drugs that aren't related to occupational health problems. Pain medications for back injuries, respiratory medications for chemical exposure, and antibiotics for infection treatment may not be covered or may require expensive copayments. Mental health coverage exclusions ignore the psychological trauma associated with dangerous work, workplace injuries, and constant exposure to death and disability risks. Depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorders related to workplace incidents receive minimal coverage, while workers struggle with psychological problems that affect their ability to work safely. Preventive care limitations reduce access to health screening and early detection services that could identify work-related health problems before they become serious and expensive to treat. Regular health monitoring that could detect chemical exposure effects, hearing loss, or other occupational health problems is often not covered or not available through employer-provided insurance. Coverage termination immediately upon employment separation leaves workers without health care precisely when they need it most due to work-related injuries or health problems that force them to leave their jobs. COBRA continuation coverage costs more than most garbage workers can afford while providing the same inadequate coverage that was unaffordable while employed. The health insurance system serves primarily to transfer healthcare costs from employers to workers, while providing minimal actual protection against the medical expenses that result from dangerous working conditions and occupational health hazards that are inherent in waste collection work. Chapter 16. The Family Destruction. The demands and dangers of garbage collection don't stop affecting your life when you clock out. They follow you home and systematically destroy relationships, family stability, and personal connections that make life meaningful outside of work. Scheduled disruption from early morning starts and irregular hours makes it nearly impossible to maintain normal family routines or participate in activities that require predictable availability. When your workday starts at 4 a.m., your evening ends by 8 p.m. if you want adequate sleep. Eliminating participation in most social activities, family events, and community involvement that happen during normal evening hours. Physical exhaustion from dangerous, demanding work leaves little energy for family relationships, household responsibilities, or personal interests that require physical or emotional engagement. After 10 hours of lifting heavy containers, dodging traffic, and breathing toxic fumes, workers often lack the stamina for meaningful interaction with spouses and children who need attention and involvement. Chronic pain from repetitive stress injuries, back problems, and cumulative physical damage creates irritability, depression, and reduced participation in family activities that require physical comfort or mobility. Parents who can't play with their children, spouses who can't share recreational activities, and individuals who can't pursue personal interests due to work-related pain and disability Financial stress from modest wages and expensive health insurance creates family tensions over money management, lifestyle limitations, and future planning, while making it difficult to provide children with educational opportunities and experiences that middle-class families consider normal. The financial pressures of supporting a family on garbage collector wages often require both parents to work multiple jobs. Health concerns from chemical exposure, injury risks, and occupational disease create family anxiety about worker safety and long-term health outcomes, while generating medical expenses that strain family budgets. Spouses and children who worry constantly about workplace accidents and gradual health deterioration experience stress that affects their own psychological and physical well-being. Social isolation results from work schedules that conflict with normal social patterns, while community attitudes toward garbage work create barriers to social acceptance and relationship development. Families may feel excluded from community activities and social groups due to stigma associated with waste collection, employment. Educational limitations for workers who lack time and energy for continuing education affect family economic mobility and children's educational opportunities when parents can't provide homework help, school involvement, or educational support that requires knowledge and availability. Limited educational backgrounds that led to garbage collection work also limit family resources for supporting children's academic development. Career advancement obstacles create family frustration when workers have few options for improving their employment situation or developing career progression that would provide better working conditions and higher wages. The specialized nature of garbage work provides limited, transferable skills for career change, while physical demands make long-term employment unsustainable. Retirement planning difficulties arise when physically demanding work can't be sustained into normal retirement years, while wages don't provide adequate savings opportunities for early retirement or career transition. Workers often face disability retirement due to work-related health problems, rather than voluntary retirement after successful careers. Intergenerational effects occur when children of garbage workers internalize negative attitudes about their family's social status while witnessing the physical and psychological toll that dangerous work takes on their parents. Educational and career choices may be limited by family, economic circumstances, and social isolation that affects opportunities for advancement. Relationship strain from stress, fatigue, and health problems associated with garbage collection work creates higher divorce rates and family instability that affects children's development and family economic security. The combination of dangerous work, financial pressure, and social stigma creates multiple stressors that challenge even strong family relationships. Community involvement limitations due to schedule conflicts and physical exhaustion reduce family participation in religious activities, volunteer organizations, and civic engagement that provides social support and community connection. Families become isolated from support networks that could help address the challenges associated with dangerous employment. Chapter 17. The political abandonment. Despite performing essential public services that every community depends on, garbage workers receive minimal political support for improved safety regulations, better working conditions, or adequate compensation that reflects the social importance and personal risks of their work. Regulatory neglect affects workplace safety standards that fail to address the unique combination of hazards faced by garbage workers, while enforcement of existing regulations is often inadequate to prevent injuries and illnesses that could be avoided through better oversight and stronger requirements for protective equipment and safe work practices. Political funding priorities that emphasize visible public services like police, firefighters, and teachers while minimizing support for waste collection workers, whose work is equally essential but less politically popular. Municipal budgets that prioritize services that generate voter approval while treating garbage collection as a necessary evil rather than essential infrastructure. Labor law exclusions that limit collective bargaining rights in workplace protections for municipal employees while providing fewer legal remedies for discrimination, unsafe working conditions, and employer retaliation than workers in other industries receive. Public sector employment restrictions that limit strikes and other forms of labor protest while failing to provide alternative mechanisms for addressing workplace problems. Occupational health monitoring that receives minimal funding and attention from public health agencies despite clear evidence that garbage workers face higher rates of injury, illness, and death than most other occupational groups. Research into occupational health problems affecting waste collection workers is limited, while prevention programs receive inadequate funding and support. Environmental justice issues that place waste disposal facilities in low-income communities with limited political power, while exposing garbage workers to cumulative environmental hazards that affect their health and the health of their families and communities. Political decisions about waste management that prioritize cost reduction over environmental protection and worker safety. Workers' compensation systems that favor employers and insurance. Companies over injured workers while providing inadequate benefits and creating bureaucratic obstacles that discourage legitimate claims and delay necessary medical treatment. Legal reforms that have weakened workers' compensation protections, while making it more difficult for injured workers to receive adequate compensation. Public procurement policies that prioritize low-cost waste collection contracts over safety performance and worker protection, while encouraging contractors to cut costs through reduced wages, inadequate equipment, and minimal safety training. Municipal contracting that focuses on price competition rather than service quality and worker welfare. Immigration policy enforcement that creates additional vulnerabilities for garbage workers who may lack legal immigration status, while performing essential community services that most citizens avoid. Political rhetoric that demonizes immigrant workers, while ignoring their contributions to public health and community functionality. Healthcare policy that fails to address occupational health needs, while creating barriers to medical care for workers who face unique health risks from chemical exposure, physical demands, and injury hazards. Public health policies that focus on individual lifestyle choices rather than occupational and environmental factors that affect community health. Educational funding that fails to provide adequate career training and advancement. Opportunities for workers seeking to transition from physically demanding jobs, while limiting access to education and skills development that could improve career prospects and economic mobility. Economic development policies that emphasize technology and service industries, while ignoring the essential infrastructure work that supports community functioning and economic development. Political leaders who promote economic growth while failing to recognize or support the workers who provide essential services that make economic activity possible. The political abandonment of garbage workers reflects broader social attitudes that devalue essential work while privileging professional and technical occupations that are considered more socially important, despite depending on infrastructure services provided by workers who face extraordinary risks for modest compensation. Chapter 18. The Corporate Exploitation Machine. The privatization of waste collection services has transformed essential public services into profit-generating enterprises that maximize shareholder returns by minimizing worker compensation, safety investments, and operational costs, while maintaining service levels through systematic exploitation of employees. Cost-cutting priorities that drive corporate waste management focus on reducing labor expenses through wage suppression, benefit reductions, and staffing minimization while maintaining productivity. Requirements that force workers to accept dangerous conditions and impossible performance standards to keep their jobs. Safety equipment and training reductions that eliminate protective measures and educational programs that could prevent injuries while maintaining legal compliance. Through minimal standards that provide corporate legal protection without ensuring worker safety. Companies that meet regulatory requirements on paper while providing inadequate practical protection for workers facing daily hazards. Route optimization software that maximizes collection efficiency and vehicle utilization while ignoring the physical and safety impacts on workers who must complete impossible schedules under dangerous conditions. Computer algorithms that optimize corporate profits while treating workers as expendable resources whose health and safety are secondary to operational efficiency. Equipment maintenance deferrals that reduce operational costs, while increasing equipment failure rates and safety hazards for workers who depend on properly functioning machinery for their safety and survival. Corporate policies that prioritize short-term cost savings over long-term equipment, reliability, and worker protection. Health insurance cost shifting that transfers medical expenses from corporations to workers while reducing corporate healthcare obligations through high-deductible plans. Narrow provider networks and coverage exclusions that make adequate healthcare unaffordable for workers facing occupational health risks. Performance monitoring systems that track worker productivity while ignoring safety compliance and health protection measures that could reduce efficiency but improve worker welfare. Corporate metrics that reward speed and cost reduction while penalizing safety practices that might slow operations or increase expenses. Subcontracting relationships that shift liability from primary contractors to smaller companies with fewer resources for safety programs, insurance coverage, and regulatory compliance while maintaining profit margins. Through exploitation of vulnerable workers who have limited employment alternatives. Union avoidance strategies that prevent collective bargaining while maintaining corporate control over wages, working conditions, and safety policies through intimidation, surveillance, and retaliation against workers who attempt to organize for better working conditions and protection from exploitation. Executive compensation packages that provide millions in bonuses and stock options for corporate leaders while minimizing investment in worker safety, equipment improvement, and operational changes that could reduce profits but improve working conditions for employees who face daily risks. Political influence through lobbying and campaign contributions that shapes regulatory policies, government contracting requirements, and legislative priorities in ways that benefit corporate interests while preventing improvements in worker protection and safety. Requirements that might reduce profitability, market consolidation that eliminates competition and creates monopolistic control over waste collection services, while reducing worker bargaining power and creating employment situations where workers have few alternatives to exploitative corporate employers who control entire regional markets. The corporate exploitation machine operates through systematic extraction of value from workers, while externalizing costs onto communities, taxpayers, and the workers themselves, who bear the health, safety, and economic consequences of corporate profit maximization strategies. Chapter 19: The Environmental Justice Crisis. Garbage workers become unwilling participants in environmental racism and economic inequality that concentrates environmental hazards in communities of color and low income areas while exposing workers to cumulative pollution that compounds the occupational hazards they already face. Facility location patterns that place landfills, transfer stations, and waste processing facilities in minority communities and economically disadvantaged areas create additional exposure to environmental contamination for workers who live and work in areas with cumulative pollution from multiple sources. Environmental racism that affects both workplace exposures and residential health risks. Air quality degradation from waste disposal operations creates chronic respiratory exposure for workers, while contributing to community-wide health problems that disproportionately affect low-income populations, who have limited resources for medical care and pollution avoidance. Cumulative air pollution that exceeds healthy levels, while regulatory agencies provide minimal protection. Water contamination from landfill leachate, surface runoff, and groundwater pollution affects drinking water quality in communities where waste facilities operate, while creating additional chemical exposure pathways for workers and residents who depend on contaminated water sources for daily needs. Soil contamination from historical waste disposal practices and current operations creates long-term environmental health hazards, while property values decline in affected areas, trapping residents in contaminated environments where they face ongoing health risks from multiple pollution sources. Traffic pollution from waste collection vehicles and disposal trucks creates air quality problems in neighborhoods where collection operations concentrate, while contributing to respiratory disease, cardiovascular problems, and environmental health disparities that affect vulnerable populations. Noise pollution from early morning collection operations and disposal facility activities creates community health problems while violating residents' rights to peaceful enjoyment of their homes. Environmental noise that exceeds healthy levels while municipal policies prioritize operational efficiency over community welfare. Toxic release reporting that fails to accurately measure and communicate environmental health risks while allowing waste management operations to continue despite evidence of community health impacts. Regulatory systems that prioritize industry interests over environmental protection and community health. Environmental monitoring gaps that prevent adequate assessment of health risks, while limiting community access to information about pollution levels and health threats that affect their daily lives. Inadequate data collection that prevents effective regulation and community protection from environmental hazards. Community engagement barriers that limit resident participation in decision-making about waste management policies, while providing minimal opportunity for community input on operations that affect their health, safety, and quality of life. Democratic deficits that exclude affected communities from environmental decision-making. Cumulative impact assessment failures that evaluate individual pollution sources in isolation, rather than considering the combined health effects of multiple environmental stresses that affect low-income communities and communities of color disproportionately. Regulatory approaches that ignore environmental justice concerns. Health disparities, documentation that demonstrates higher rates of respiratory disease, cancer, and other health problems in communities where waste facilities operate, while providing minimal resources for medical care and health. Protection programs that could address environmental health inequities. The environmental justice crisis creates additional health risks for garbage workers, while contributing to broader patterns of environmental racism that concentrate pollution in vulnerable communities and expose workers to cumulative environmental hazards that compound occupational health risks. Chapter 20. The Technology False Promise. Automation and technological improvements in waste collection are marketed as solutions that will improve worker safety and job quality. But the reality is that most technology innovations are designed to reduce labor costs and increase productivity while creating new hazards and eliminating good-paying jobs. Automated lifting systems that reduce manual lifting requirements also create new crushing hazards when mechanical systems malfunction or operate unexpectedly while workers are positioned near moving equipment. The technology that eliminates repetitive stress injuries from manual lifting creates new risks of traumatic injuries from mechanical failures. Route optimization software that improves collection efficiency also increases route density and time pressure, while creating impossible schedules that force workers to take safety risks to complete assigned work within allotted time periods. Technology that maximizes productivity often eliminates the time margins that allow for safe work practices. GPS tracking and telematics systems that monitor vehicle location and operation also create surveillance and performance pressure that eliminates worker autonomy, while generating data used to discipline workers for safety practices that might slow operations but prevent injuries. Technology that enables micromanagement while reducing worker control over safety decisions. Robotic collection vehicles that eliminate worker exposure to traffic hazards also eliminate jobs, while requiring higher skill levels and technical training that many current workers can't access. Automation that improves safety for some workers while creating unemployment for others who lack resources for career transition. Sensor technology that monitors equipment, performance, and predicts maintenance needs also generates data used to defer maintenance and extend equipment service intervals beyond safe limits, while reducing the workforce needed for preventive maintenance programs. Technology that enables cost-cutting while increasing equipment failure risks. Communication systems that improve coordination between workers and supervisors also create constant monitoring and interruption that increases stress while eliminating the informal work practices that experienced workers use to manage safety risks and work pace effectively. Data collection systems that track safety, performance, and regulatory compliance also generate information used to shift blame for accidents from systemic problems to individual worker behavior, while providing legal protection for employers who can demonstrate compliance with minimal standards. Waste sorting technology that reduces worker exposure to hazardous materials also creates new employment categories with lower wages and fewer benefits while eliminating career advancement. Pathways for workers in traditional collection jobs. Technology that improves working conditions while reducing economic opportunities. Vehicle design improvements that enhance safety features also increase equipment costs while creating pressure to extend vehicle service lives and defer replacement of aging equipment that develops safety problems. Technology that improves safety when new while creating new hazards as equipment ages. Training simulators and virtual reality systems that provide safety education also replace hands-on training and mentorship programs that build practical skills and safety awareness through experience and human interaction. Technology that standardizes training while eliminating knowledge transfer from experienced workers. The false promise of technology lies in the assumption that engineering solutions can address problems that require systemic changes in economic incentives, regulatory enforcement, and corporate priorities that affect how technology is implemented and whose interests it serves in practice. Chapter 21: The Injury and Death Statistics. The numbers don't lie about waste collection being one of America's deadliest occupations, but the statistics only hint at the human cost of a system that treats worker death and disability as acceptable business expenses rather than preventable tragedies that require systematic changes. Fatality rates in waste collection exceed most other occupations by factors of 10 or more, with garbage workers dying at work more frequently than police officers, firefighters, and construction workers, despite receiving less public recognition or support for the dangers they face daily. Annual fatality rates that consistently rank waste collection among the top 5 most dangerous occupations in America. Traffic-related deaths account for the largest category of work fatalities among garbage workers, with workers struck by vehicles while working in traffic lanes, crushed during backing accidents, and killed in collisions between waste collection vehicles and other traffic. Preventable deaths that occur because of inadequate traffic safety measures and public indifference to worker protection. Mechanical accidents from equipment failures, hydraulic system malfunctions, and crushing injuries from automated collection systems create traumatic deaths that often could be prevented through better equipment design, maintenance programs, and safety procedures that prioritize worker protection over operational efficiency. Chemical exposure deaths from toxic gases, industrial accidents, and hazardous material incidents demonstrate the inadequacy of current safety procedures and protective equipment, while highlighting the need for hazardous material training and emergency response capabilities. Chemical exposure deaths from toxic gases, industrial accidents, and hazardous material incidents demonstrate the inadequacy of current safety procedures and protective equipment, while highlighting the need for hazardous material training and emergency response capabilities that are rarely provided to workers. Handling unknown and potentially lethal substances daily. Injury rates that far exceed national averages across multiple categories, including back injuries, cuts and lacerations, chemical burns, respiratory problems, and musculoskeletal disorders that affect nearly every garbage worker over the course of their career. Occupational injuries that are treated as inevitable rather than preventable through better working conditions and safety measures. Lost time injuries that force workers off the job for extended periods, while creating financial hardship for families who depend on wages from dangerous work that provides minimal sick leave or disability benefits. Work-related injuries that often lead to permanent disability and career-ending health problems that affect workers' ability to support their families. Repetitive stress injuries from manual lifting, awkward working positions, and constant physical demands that create chronic pain and disability affecting quality of life, both at work and at home. Cumulative trauma that develops gradually but becomes permanently disabling while workers. Compensation systems often deny coverage for conditions that develop over time. Respiratory diseases from chronic exposure to dust, chemical vapors, biological contaminants, and toxic gases that cause long-term health problems, including asthma, chemical sensitivity, and lung damage that may not be diagnosed until years after the exposure occurred. Occupational diseases that are difficult to prove and often not covered by workers' compensation. Hearing loss from constant exposure to equipment noise, hydraulic systems, and diesel engines that exceed safe levels, while causing permanent disability that affects workers' ability to communicate and maintain. Awareness of safety hazards. Preventable hearing damage that is accepted as a normal consequence of waste collection work. Skin disorders from chemical exposure, biological contamination, and contact with hazardous materials that cause chronic dermatitis. Allergic reactions and chemical sensitivity that make normal activities painful and difficult. Occupational skin diseases that often require ongoing medical treatment and lifestyle modifications. Psychological trauma from workplace accidents, constant exposure to death risks, and witnessing serious injuries to co-workers that create post-traumatic stress. Anxiety and depression affecting workers' mental health and family relationships. Psychological injuries that receive minimal recognition or treatment despite affecting workers' ability to perform safely. Cancer rates among garbage workers that exceed population averages for multiple cancer types associated with chemical exposure, diesel exhaust, and hazardous material contact while demonstrating the long-term health consequences of occupational exposures that may not become apparent until retirement years. Disability retirement rates that force workers to leave employment due to work-related health problems before normal retirement age, while creating financial hardship for families who expected continued employment, income, and benefits. Early retirement due to disability that affects family, financial security, and retirement planning. Workers' compensation claim denial rates that leave injured workers without adequate medical care or income replacement, while creating barriers to treatment and rehabilitation that could help workers recover from job-related injuries and return to productive employment. Underreporting of injuries and illnesses that occurs when workers fear retaliation, can't afford time off work, or don't understand the connection between work exposures and health problems that develop gradually over time. Statistical undercounting that makes waste collection appear safer than it actually is, while preventing accurate assessment of occupational health risks. The statistics reveal a pattern of preventable death and disability that continues because society has accepted worker casualties as the price of waste. Collection services, rather than demanding the safety improvements and systemic changes that could protect workers while maintaining essential community services. Chapter 22. The Retirement Impossibility. The physical demands and health hazards of garbage collection make it virtually impossible for workers to continue employment until normal retirement age, creating a cruel irony where essential workers who sacrifice their bodies for community service face economic insecurity and inadequate retirement benefits when age and injury force them from the workforce. Physical deterioration from decades of heavy lifting, chemical exposure, and dangerous working conditions accelerates aging while creating disabilities that force retirement long before workers reach eligibility for full social security and pension benefits. Bodies that are worn out by physically demanding work while retirement systems assume workers can continue employment into their 60s and 70s. Back injuries and musculoskeletal problems that accumulate over years of garbage collection work often become severe enough to prevent continued employment while workers' compensation benefits expire and long-term disability coverage provides inadequate income replacement for families who expected continued employment earnings. Respiratory diseases from chronic exposure to dust, chemicals, and biological contaminants may not become apparent until workers reach their 50s or 60s, when lung damage from decades of occupational exposure creates breathing problems that make continued physical work impossible, while medical treatment becomes expensive and ongoing. Cardiovascular problems associated with physical stress, chemical exposure, and occupational hazards increase heart disease and stroke risks while creating health conditions that prevent continued employment in physically demanding work. Health problems that develop from dangerous work while healthcare costs increase precisely when earning capacity declines. Cancer rates that exceed population averages among garbage workers often don't become apparent until workers reach retirement years, when the latency period for occupational cancers results in devastating diagnoses that require expensive treatment, while eliminating ability to continue working and earning income. Hearing loss from decades of noise exposure becomes severe enough to affect job performance and safety, while creating communication difficulties that make continued employment dangerous for workers who can't hear traffic, equipment sounds, or safety warnings from co-workers. Pension benefits that assume full career employment don't provide adequate retirement income for workers who must retire early due to disability or health problems, while Social Security disability benefits require extensive documentation and often face denial despite clear evidence of work-related health problems. Healthcare costs that increase dramatically for aging workers with occupational health problems often exceed retirement income, while Medicare coverage doesn't begin until age 65, creating gaps in health insurance for workers who retire early due to work-related disabilities. Financial planning that becomes impossible when workers can't predict how long they'll be able to continue. Physically demanding work, while wages that barely cover current living expenses don't allow adequate savings for early retirement or extended periods of disability. Second career options that are limited for workers whose bodies are damaged by decades of physical labor, while educational backgrounds and transferable skills don't provide access to less physically demanding employment that pays comparable wages and benefits. Family financial security that depends on continued employment income becomes threatened when workers face forced retirement due to health problems, while spouses and children must adjust expectations and lifestyle to accommodate reduced family income and increased medical expenses. Social security benefits that are calculated based on highest earning years don't provide adequate replacement income for workers who must stop working during their peak earning years due to work-related health problems, while the benefit calculation system penalizes workers who can't continue employment until normal retirement age. Workers' compensation settlements that provide lump sum payments for permanent disabilities rarely provide adequate compensation for lost lifetime earnings, while creating tax liabilities and financial management challenges for workers who lack experience with large financial settlements. The retirement impossibility creates a situation where workers who perform essential community services face economic insecurity and inadequate support during their later years, precisely because they sacrifice their health and physical capacity to maintain public health and environmental quality for the communities they served. Chapter 23. The Union Struggle. Organizing garbage workers for collective bargaining and workplace protection faces unique challenges from corporate union busting, political interference, and the vulnerability of workers who risk retaliation for demanding better working conditions and safety protections while performing essential public services. Public sector union restrictions that limit collective bargaining rights for municipal employees, while providing fewer strike options and political protections than private sector workers receive. Legal limitations that prevent garbage workers from using traditional labor organizing tactics, while employers face fewer restrictions on anti-union activities. Corporate union avoidance that uses sophisticated strategies to prevent worker organization, while maintaining legal compliance through techniques that intimidate workers and divide potential union supporters. Professional union busting consultants who specialize in preventing garbage worker organization while helping companies maintain control over wages and working conditions. Worker vulnerability that creates fear of retaliation among employees who depend on garbage collection jobs for family support while facing limited alternative employment options if they lose their jobs for union organizing activities. Economic pressure that makes workers reluctant to risk employment for uncertain benefits from collective bargaining. Political interference that uses municipal authority and government influence to discourage union organization while supporting corporate interests in maintaining low wages and minimal safety requirements for waste collection services. Political leaders who claim to support workers while opposing policies that would improve working conditions and compensation. Divide and conquer tactics that pit different groups of workers against each other, while preventing unified organizing efforts that could build sufficient power to challenge corporate control over working conditions. Strategies that exploit racial, ethnic, and immigration status differences among workers while preventing solidarity that could improve conditions for everyone. legal intimidation that uses complex labor laws and bureaucratic procedures to delay and discourage, organizing efforts while providing employers with multiple opportunities to challenge, union elections and collective bargaining efforts through administrative and legal proceedings, surveillance and monitoring that tracks worker communications, meeting attendance, and organizing activities, while creating atmosphere of fear and paranoia that prevents effective organizing and coalition building, corporate intelligence gathering that identifies and targets union supporters for retaliation and harassment, economic pressure that uses schedule changes, overtime manipulation, and benefits adjustments to reward workers who oppose union organization while penalizing those who support collective bargaining, financial incentives that divide workers while preventing unified action for improved working conditions, media manipulation that portrays union organizing as harmful to public services and community interests, while ignoring worker safety concerns and the relationship between working conditions and service quality, public relations campaigns that turn community sentiment against worker organization while protecting corporate interests, immigration status exploitation that uses workers' vulnerability to deportation and legal challenges to prevent organizing while creating fear that union activity could result in immigration enforcement actions, threats that prevent undocumented workers from participating in organizing efforts while dividing potential union supporters. Success stories from organized garbage workers demonstrate the potential benefits of collective bargaining, while showing that improved working conditions and safety protections are possible when workers have union representation and political support for better employment standards. The union struggle continues despite obstacles because organized workers have achieved significant improvements in wages, benefits, safety equipment, training programs, and workplace protections, while demonstrating that collective action can address the systemic problems that individual workers cannot solve alone. Chapter 24: The Community Health Impact. Garbage workers serve as the front line of public health protection, while their own health and safety problems affect community well-being through disease transmission, environmental contamination, and the social costs of occupational injuries and illnesses that ripple through families and neighborhoods. Disease transmission prevention that depends on safe waste collection practices, while worker health problems can compromise community protection from infectious diseases, toxic exposure, and environmental contamination that affects public health beyond the workers directly involved in collection services. Environmental protection that requires adequate staffing, proper equipment, and safe working procedures, while cost-cutting and corner-cutting that endanger workers also compromise environmental protection and community health through inadequate waste management and disposal practices, public health infrastructure that depends on reliable waste collection services, while worker safety problems create service disruptions, equipment failures, and operational challenges that affect community health and environmental quality. Essential services that require healthy, adequately trained workers to function effectively. Emergency response capacity that relies on garbage workers who often serve as first responders during natural disasters, disease outbreaks, and environmental emergencies, while worker health and safety problems reduce community resilience and emergency preparedness capabilities. Community economic impact from worker injuries, illnesses, and disabilities that affect family income, healthcare costs, and social services, while creating financial burdens for communities that depend on healthy, productive workers for essential services and economic stability. Healthcare systems strain from occupational injuries and illnesses affecting garbage workers, while emergency departments, hospitals, and medical specialists deal with preventable health problems that could be avoided through better working conditions and safety protections. Social services demands that increase when worker families face financial hardship from job-related injuries, disabilities, and health problems, while communities must provide assistance for families whose breadwinners are injured or sickened by dangerous working conditions. Environmental justice implications that affect low-income communities and communities of color disproportionately, while garbage worker health problems reflect broader patterns of environmental racism and economic inequality that compromise community health and social equity. Workforce stability that affects service quality and community health, while high turnover, injury rates, and disability retirement among garbage workers create staffing challenges that compromise waste collection services and environmental protection programs. Public education opportunities that could improve community support for worker safety, while helping residents understand the connection between safe working conditions and effective waste management services. Community awareness that could generate political support for worker protection and service improvements. Policy integration that could address worker health and community health simultaneously, while recognizing that improvements in working conditions benefit both workers and the communities they serve through better service quality and environmental protection. Research and monitoring that could document the relationship between worker health and community health, while providing evidence for policy changes that improve both occupational safety and public health outcomes through integrated approaches to environmental and occupational health protection. The community health impact demonstrates that garbage worker safety and community well-being are interconnected, while improvements in working conditions benefit both workers and the communities that depend on essential waste management services for public health and environmental protection. Chapter 25. The environmental destruction. The waste collection system that garbage workers operate within contributes to massive environmental destruction through energy consumption, emissions production, and disposal practices that prioritize short-term cost savings over long-term environmental sustainability, while exposing workers to the environmental consequences of unsustainable waste management practices. Fossil fuel consumption from garbage trucks that average 3 to 5 miles per gallon, while consuming enormous quantities of diesel fuel that contributes to air pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, and climate change. Vehicle emissions that affect both local air quality and global environmental problems, while creating occupational exposure to diesel exhaust that causes cancer and respiratory disease. Landfill methane production from organic waste decomposition that creates potent greenhouse gas emissions, while contributing to climate change and creating explosion hazards for workers operating in disposal facilities. Methane capture systems that are often inadequate, while workers face exposure to toxic gases during routine operations. Toxic waste disposal that fails to adequately protect groundwater, soil, and air quality, while creating long-term environmental contamination that affects both workers and surrounding communities. Hazardous material management that prioritizes cost reduction over environmental protection, while exposing workers to chemical hazards. Recycling program failures that result in recyclable materials being sent to landfills, while creating additional handling and transportation requirements that increase worker exposure to hazardous materials and environmental contaminants. Recycling contamination that affects worker safety while reducing environmental benefits. Air pollution from collection vehicles, disposal facilities, and waste processing operations that contributes to respiratory disease and environmental health problems, while creating cumulative exposure for workers who spend their careers breathing contaminated air in occupational and community settings. Water contamination from landfill leachate, vehicle maintenance, and facility operations that affects drinking water supplies, while creating additional chemical exposure pathways for workers and communities. Near waste management facilities. Groundwater pollution that may not become apparent until years after contamination occurs. Soil contamination from historical disposal practices and current operations that creates long-term environmental liabilities, while affecting agricultural productivity and environmental quality in areas where waste facilities operate. Soil pollution that affects both environmental health and occupational safety for workers. Wildlife habitat destruction from landfill expansion and waste. Facility construction, while creating conflicts between waste management and environmental conservation that affect ecosystem health and biodiversity. Environmental impact that extends beyond immediate facility areas while affecting regional environmental quality. Energy waste from inefficient collection routes, equipment operation, and disposal practices that consume excessive energy while contributing to environmental problems through unnecessary fossil fuel consumption and emissions production. Operational inefficiencies that increase environmental impact while creating additional occupational hazards. Plastic pollution from inadequate recycling and disposal practices that contribute to ocean contamination and environmental degradation while creating handling hazards for workers who must manage. Increasing volumes of plastic waste without adequate safety protections. Environmental monitoring gaps that prevent adequate assessment of environmental impact while limiting worker and community protection from pollution exposure. Data collection failures that make it impossible to evaluate environmental and occupational health risks accurately while preventing effective environmental protection measures. The environmental destruction created by current waste management practices affects workers through increased exposure to environmental contaminants while contributing to global environmental problems that require systematic changes in waste reduction, recycling, and disposal practices that prioritize environmental protection and worker safety. Chapter 26. The Global Perspective. Waste management practices and worker safety standards in other developed countries demonstrate that the dangerous working conditions and inadequate protections faced by American garbage workers are not inevitable features of waste collection, but rather policy choices that prioritize cost reduction over worker welfare and environmental protection. International safety standards that provide better worker protection through mandatory safety equipment, training requirements, vehicle design standards, and workplace safety regulations that exceed American standards while demonstrating that improved safety is economically feasible and operationally practical. European approaches to waste management that emphasize worker safety, environmental protection, and service quality while providing higher wages, better benefits, and safer working conditions for garbage workers through stronger labor laws and environmental regulations that prioritize worker welfare. Scandinavian models that integrate worker safety, environmental protection, and social welfare through comprehensive approaches to waste management that treat garbage workers as skilled professionals, deserving of safe working conditions, adequate compensation, and social respect for essential community services. German waste management systems that provide extensive worker training, safety equipment, and career development opportunities while maintaining high service standards and environmental protection through investments in worker skills and safety technologies that American companies claim are too expensive. Japanese approaches to waste collection that emphasize safety, efficiency, and environmental protection through systematic worker training, equipment, maintenance, and operational procedures that prioritize worker welfare while achieving superior environmental and service outcomes. Canadian safety regulations that provide stronger worker protections through mandatory safety training, equipment requirements, and regulatory enforcement that demonstrates the effectiveness of comprehensive approaches to occupational safety in waste management operations. Australian workplace safety systems that integrate worker protection, environmental standards, and service quality through regulatory frameworks that hold employers accountable for worker safety while providing resources for safety equipment, training, and operational improvements. International labor standards that provide guidelines for worker protection in waste management, while demonstrating global consensus about minimum safety requirements that exceed current American practices for protecting garbage workers from occupational hazards, technology applications in other countries that improve worker safety through equipment design, automation systems, and operational procedures that reduce worker exposure to traffic hazards, mechanical dangers, and chemical risks, while maintaining service effectiveness and economic viability. Environmental integration approaches that address worker safety and environmental protection simultaneously, while recognizing that improvements in working conditions often improve environmental outcomes through better operational practices and reduced pollution exposure. Economic analysis from international examples that demonstrates the cost-effectiveness of worker safety investments, while showing that improved working conditions can reduce overall operational costs through lower injury rates, reduced turnover, and improved productivity. The global perspective reveals that American garbage workers face unnecessarily dangerous working conditions, while international examples demonstrate that substantial improvements in worker safety, compensation, and working conditions are practical and economically feasible through policy changes that prioritize worker welfare and environmental protection. Chapter 27. The Future Scenarios. The future of waste collection work will be shaped by technological changes, environmental pressures, and policy decisions that could either improve working conditions and safety for garbage workers or accelerate the trends toward automation and cost-cutting that eliminate jobs while failing to address the fundamental problems of worker safety and environmental protection. Automation scenarios that could eliminate many garbage collection jobs, while concentrating remaining work in more technical positions that require higher skills but may not provide better working conditions or safety protections. Robotic collection systems that reduce some hazards, while creating new risks from complex technology and reduced human oversight. Climate change impacts that will increase extreme weather events, while creating additional hazards for garbage workers who must continue operations during heat waves, storms, and flooding that make dangerous work even more deadly. Environmental changes that require adaptation in equipment, procedures, and safety protections. Demographic changes that affect workforce availability, while creating challenges for recruiting and retaining workers willing to accept dangerous working conditions for modest compensation. Aging workforce problems that occur when physical demands make long-term employment unsustainable, while younger workers seek less dangerous employment alternatives. Economic pressures that could force additional cost-cutting and safety reductions, while increasing performance demands that make working conditions worse for remaining workers. Corporate consolidation that reduces competition and worker bargaining power while increasing pressure for productivity improvements that compromise safety. Regulatory possibilities that could improve worker safety through stronger standards, better enforcement, and comprehensive approaches to occupational health protection. Political changes that could provide better worker protections while ensuring adequate funding for safety equipment, training, and operational improvements. Technology integration that could improve worker safety through better equipment design, hazard detection systems, and communication tools while maintaining human control over safety-critical decisions and providing adequate training for new technologies that change working procedures. Environmental policy changes that could improve both worker safety and environmental protection through integrated approaches that address occupational and environmental health, simultaneously while providing adequate funding for improvements that benefit workers and communities. Workforce development programs that could provide career advancement opportunities while helping workers transition to less dangerous employment or develop skills for supervisory and technical positions in waste management that offer better working conditions and compensation. Labor organizing potential that could improve working conditions through collective bargaining, while building political support for regulatory changes that protect workers and improve service quality through adequate staffing, safety equipment, and operational standards. International policy adoption that could improve American worker protections through implementation of safety standards and worker rights that have proven effective in other developed countries, while adapting successful approaches to American conditions and regulatory systems. Community engagement strategies that could build public support for worker safety, while educating communities about the connection between safe working conditions and effective waste management services that protect public health and environmental quality. Research and development that could improve worker safety while advancing waste management technology through collaborative efforts between workers, employers, and research institutions that prioritize worker welfare alongside operational efficiency and environmental protection. The future scenarios demonstrate that substantial improvements in garbage worker safety and working conditions are possible through policy changes, technology applications, and organizing efforts that prioritize worker welfare while maintaining essential community services and environmental protection. Chapter 28: The Personal Recovery. For garbage workers who survive years of dangerous employment and transition to other work, recovery from the physical and psychological damage requires understanding that their health problems and ongoing challenges result from systematic workplace hazards rather than personal failures or inevitable consequences of essential work. Physical rehabilitation that addresses the cumulative damage from years of heavy lifting, chemical exposure, and dangerous working conditions, while providing medical care that many workers couldn't afford during their employment. Injury treatment and pain management that may require expensive medical procedures and ongoing therapy. Hearing restoration through hearing aids and assistive devices, while adapting to permanent hearing loss that affects communication and quality of life long after leaving garbage collection work. Audiological care that addresses noise-induced hearing damage while helping workers adapt to hearing limitations. Respiratory treatment for chronic lung problems caused by chemical exposure, dust, inhalation, and biological contamination that may require ongoing medical care and lifestyle modifications. Pulmonary rehabilitation that addresses occupational lung disease while helping workers maintain breathing capacity and respiratory health. Mental health support for anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress related to workplace accidents, constant danger, and the psychological stress of dangerous employment. Counseling and therapy that addresses the emotional impact of hazardous work while helping workers rebuild confidence and mental health. Career transition assistance that helps workers develop new skills and find employment that doesn't require the physical demands and safety. Risks of garbage collection while providing adequate income for family support. Vocational rehabilitation that addresses the educational and training needs of workers seeking career changes. Financial counseling that addresses debt accumulated during low-wage employment, while helping workers manage medical expenses and financial challenges related to work-related health problems. financial planning that addresses the economic consequences of dangerous employment and health-related work limitations, social support networks that connect former garbage workers with others who understand the challenges of transitioning from dangerous employment while providing mutual assistance and advocacy for worker rights and safety improvements, peer support that addresses the isolation and stigma associated with garbage collection work, legal assistance for workers' compensation claims, disability benefits, and other legal issues related to work-related injuries and illnesses, while navigating complex bureaucratic systems that often deny legitimate claims, legal advocacy that helps workers obtain fair compensation for work-related health problems, educational opportunities that were postponed during garbage collection employment, while helping workers develop knowledge and skills that provide career advancement and personal satisfaction, adult education that addresses the learning needs of workers seeking intellectual development and career growth, healthcare advocacy that ensures former garbage workers receive appropriate medical care for work-related health problems while helping them navigate insurance systems and obtain necessary treatment, medical advocacy that addresses the unique health needs of workers with occupational injury and illness histories, family counseling that addresses the stress and relationship problems caused by dangerous employment while helping families adapt to health limitations and career changes that affect family income and lifestyle, family support that recognizes the impact of occupational hazards on entire families, community involvement that allows former garbage workers to contribute their knowledge and experience to improving working conditions and safety, protections for current workers, while building political support for regulatory changes and worker protection improvements. The personal recovery process demonstrates that the health and social problems experienced by garbage workers result from systematic workplace hazards, while individual recovery requires comprehensive support that addresses medical, economic, social, and psychological consequences of dangerous employment. Chapter 29. The Social Movement. Building a movement for garbage worker safety and rights requires connecting workplace hazards to broader issues of social justice, environmental protection, and community health while organizing workers, community members, and advocacy organizations around shared interests in improving working conditions and public services. Worker organizing that builds collective power among garbage workers while overcoming the obstacles of high turnover, cooperative, retaliation, and political interference that make traditional labor organizing difficult in waste management, union organizing that adapts to the unique challenges of garbage collection while building solidarity among workers, community coalition building that connects garbage worker safety to environmental justice, public health, and community welfare while educating residents about the connection between working conditions and service quality, community organizing that builds support for worker protection while addressing environmental and health concerns, environmental justice organizing that addresses the cumulative environmental and occupational health impacts of waste management while building alliances between workers and community residents who face similar environmental hazards from industrial operations and pollution exposure, political advocacy that works for regulatory changes, funding improvements, and policy reforms that address worker safety while building political support through education about the importance of garbage collection services and the need for worker protection, media campaigns that educate the public about garbage worker safety issues, while challenging stereotypes and building support for worker rights through storytelling that humanizes workers and demonstrates the skilled, dangerous nature of waste collection work, research and documentation that provides evidence for policy changes, while documenting worker safety problems and demonstrating the effectiveness of safety improvements and regulatory changes that protect workers and improve service quality. Legal strategies that challenge unsafe working conditions while holding employers accountable for worker safety through litigation, regulatory enforcement, and policy advocacy that establishes legal protections for garbage workers and other essential workers. International solidarity that connects American garbage workers with waste management workers in other countries while sharing successful organizing strategies and safety. Improvements that have been achieved through worker organizing and political advocacy in other nations. Direct action campaigns that use strikes, protests, and other tactics to build public awareness, while creating pressure for corporate and government action on worker safety and environmental protection issues that affect both workers and communities. Cultural and artistic expression that tells the stories of garbage workers, while challenging social stereotypes and building respect for essential workers through music, visual art, theater, and other cultural work that honors worker contributions and demands justice. Educational programs that inform students, community members, and policymakers about garbage worker safety while building understanding of occupational health, environmental justice, and the importance of essential workers for community health and social functioning. Technology organizing that ensures new technologies serve worker interests while preventing automation and surveillance from worsening working conditions or eliminating jobs without providing adequate transition support for displaced workers. The social movement approach recognizes that individual workplace improvements are insufficient while systematic change requires organized action that addresses the political, economic, and social structures that create dangerous working conditions and environmental health problems affecting workers and communities. Chapter 30. The Moment of Choice. As we reach the end of this comprehensive examination of garbage collection reality, we face a crucial moment where society must choose between continuing to accept systematic worker exploitation as the price of waste management services or demanding fundamental changes that prioritize human dignity and community health over cost minimization and corporate profits. The evidence is overwhelming and undeniable. Garbage collection represents one of the most dangerous occupations in America, with fatality rates exceeding most other jobs, while workers face daily exposure to traffic hazards, mechanical dangers, toxic chemicals, and biological contaminants that cause immediate injuries and long-term health problems that affect their entire lives. Individual resilience and personal protective equipment are inadequate responses to systematic hazards that require comprehensive changes in equipment design, safety regulations, training programs, and operational procedures that prioritize worker safety over productivity and cost reduction, while ensuring adequate staffing and resources for safe operations. Market-based solutions have failed because competition between waste management companies often focuses on cost reduction rather than safety improvement, while customers choose services based on price, rather than worker safety records or environmental protection standards that would encourage better working conditions. Regulatory approaches have achieved limited success because enforcement is often inadequate, while penalties for safety violations are insufficient to change corporate behavior that treats worker injuries and deaths as acceptable business costs, rather than preventable tragedies requiring systematic prevention. The choice we face as a society is whether to continue accepting systematic worker exploitation as normal business practice while treating essential workers as expendable resources, or to demand economic and political structures that recognize garbage workers as skilled professionals deserving safe working conditions, adequate compensation, and social respect. This choice affects not only garbage workers but the entire community. Because worker safety and service quality are interconnected, while environmental protection and public health depend on adequate staffing, proper equipment, and safe operational procedures that protect both workers and communities from environmental and health hazards. The garbage collection system, as currently structured, represents a moral and economic failure that damages workers, families, and communities, while concentrating profits among corporate shareholders, who contribute nothing to actual waste management while extracting wealth from essential community services. Alternative approaches that prioritize worker safety, environmental protection, and community benefit over maximum profit extraction are practical and economically feasible, while examples from other countries and successful organizing efforts demonstrate that substantial improvements are possible through policy changes and worker organizing. Change requires more than individual consumer choices or voluntary corporate initiatives, while systematic improvements require political action, regulatory reform, and organized pressure from workers and communities, who demand better working conditions and environmental protection through collective action and policy advocacy. The question isn't whether safer garbage collection is possible. It's whether we have the political will and moral courage to demand changes that protect workers while maintaining essential services that every community depends on for public health and environmental protection. Individual choices about supporting worker organizing, voting for policymakers who prioritize worker safety, and demanding accountability from waste management companies are important while insufficient without systematic changes that address the economic and political structures that create dangerous working conditions. Conclusion: the choice we can no longer avoid. So there you have it. Not just a day in the life of a garbage collector, but an exhaustive look at one of America's most dangerous and undervalued occupations. You've seen how essential workers face daily threats that would be considered intolerable in any other context, while society treats their safety as less important than keeping waste collection costs low. But this isn't really a story about garbage collection. It's a story about us, about the kind of society we've chosen to create, where essential workers risk their lives for modest wages while the communities they serve remain largely oblivious to their sacrifices. About the values we actually live by versus the ones we claim to hold dear. Every time you put your garbage bin at the curb, you're participating in a system where fellow human beings face death and disability to maintain the basic sanitation that keeps your community healthy. The person collecting your waste may be choosing between safety and speed because impossible productivity requirements force workers to take risks that could kill them. They may be breathing toxic fumes, dodging traffic, or operating dangerous machinery while earning wages that barely support their families. The system that creates this suffering isn't an accident or an inevitable consequence of necessary work. It's a deliberate choice to prioritize cost reduction over human life, efficiency over dignity, corporate profits over worker welfare. It's a system that treats essential workers as expendable while the communities they serve enjoy the benefits of their sacrifices. The garbage workers whose experiences we've explored tonight aren't asking for pity or special treatment. They're demanding basic human dignity, safe working conditions that don't destroy their health, wages that reflect the danger and skill of their work, equipment that protects rather than endangers them, and recognition that their contributions to community health and environmental protection deserve respect rather than social stigma. These aren't radical demands. They're basic requirements for a just society. The fact that they seem impossible or unrealistic reveals how far we've strayed from our stated values of equality, opportunity, and respect for the dignity of all work. The next time someone dismisses garbage collection as unskilled labor or suggests that anyone can do it, Remember the traffic deaths, the chemical exposures, the mechanical crushing hazards, and the complex technical knowledge required to operate safely in one of America's most dangerous work environments. The next time politicians talk about supporting essential workers while opposing safety regulations or living wage requirements, remember that empty rhetoric doesn't protect workers from the daily hazards that make garbage collection more dangerous than police work or firefighting. The next time you hear complaints about the cost of waste management services, remember that those costs reflect either adequate investment in worker safety and fair compensation, or dangerous cost-cutting that shifts risks onto workers who can't afford to refuse dangerous employment. But perhaps most importantly, remember that the suffering we've explored tonight isn't inevitable. Other countries protect garbage workers through stronger safety regulations, better equipment, and living wages. Other communities have chosen to prioritize worker welfare over cost minimization. Other economic models demonstrate that essential services can be provided safely and efficiently, while treating workers with dignity. The garbage collection industry, as currently structured, represents a systemic failure that requires systematic solutions. Worker organizing, political action, regulatory reform, and community support are all necessary components of creating change that protects workers while maintaining essential services. Behind every garbage truck, on every collection route, and in every disposal facility are human beings whose lives, health, and dignity matter as much as anyone else's. Until we create economic and political systems that reflect that basic truth, we're all complicit in the ongoing tragedy of American waste management. The real question isn't whether you personally could survive a day as a garbage collector. The question is whether we, as a society, should tolerate a system that treats any essential worker as expendable while the work they perform keeps our communities safe, healthy, and functioning. Because behind every bin collected, every route completed, and every ton of waste properly disposed of, there's a human being whose sacrifice makes your daily life possible. They deserve better than what we've given them. And until they get it, our comfortable lives are built on a foundation of exploitation that diminishes all of us. The trucks are still running, the routes continue, and somewhere right now, another worker is starting another shift, hoping to make it home alive while keeping your community clean and healthy. The choice of whether that's acceptable is ours to make. The time to make it is now. Sweet dreams, and perhaps tomorrow, you'll see garbage workers not as invisible service providers, but as fellow human beings deserving of the safety, respect, and dignity that should be every worker's right. The machinery is still crushing. The chemicals are still toxic. The traffic is still deadly. And the workers are still there, facing dangers we can barely imagine for wages that barely sustain life, unless we choose to change it.